Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics podcast. I'm your host, Alex Sofronas, and today we're on with Ali DeMocker.
Hi.
Ali, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Ali DeMocker. I'm a VP of conversion rate optimization at BMG 360, which is a digital marketing agency, previously thesis testing. So, yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Alex.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here. Obviously, conversion rate optimization is really important. Do you have a focus on a particular industry vertical or B2B versus B2C?
Yeah, so mostly it's evolved quite a bit over time, but mostly right now it's lead generation, specifically in home services and insurance and all that kind of fun stuff. But I would say a few years ago, it was more on like the D2C side of things. We've really seen a shift in the industry.
Okay. And would those be classified as B2C?
Yes, they would.
Okay. Yeah. So, what are you focused on optimizing when you're doing lead generation? Is it awareness to a first sort of touch, or what are you focusing on?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So, a lot of the work that we're doing actually is more focused on landing page optimization for new user acquisition. So, a lot of times we're building landing pages for paid social traffic like Meta and TikTok and things like that. And a lot of times we're building pages for specific paid search campaigns. So, like a non brand campaign or a competitor type of like conquesting campaigns. So, a lot of our focus is on like that educational content and tailoring it towards that specific marketing channel.
Okay. So, when a business is looking at personalizing landing pages, where do you start?
That is such a good question. Contrary to popular belief, I like to start a lot more broad. So I think the best starting place is going channel specific because we know that the user behavior is very different on paid social, for example, versus paid search. On paid social, an ad catches someone's eye. So they're like, oh, let me go ahead and click and go from here. So they probably don't have a lot of context versus on search where someone is looking for something really specific. We know we need to answer that question that they're searching for, that specific query. So that's typically the best place to start. And my team, we have this set of templates that we see work best. I hate the term best practices, but we do have a bit of a playbook that we know, okay, this is an excellent place to start based off of like our 6+ years of testing and hundreds of clients that we've tested for. So how can we then start there and continue to optimize? So yeah, I guess to back up, channel specific, and then we go more specific from there just based off of our learnings and testing.
Okay. And then when you're building the landing page, what is the conversion point that you're going for? Because I've seen people be afraid to ask for a demo right away or for a purchase right away, and they prefer to put a little bit more space in between the conversion and initially learning about the product or service. So, what's your approach to the distance between a conversion and the click? Should it be really like close or a little bit more distant?
Yeah, it definitely varies, of course, per channel, per industry, and things like that. But to better answer that for lead generation, what we see is a lot of the services that we are focused on are very, you have to, it's like high consideration, either because it's something that's pretty expensive or it's something that's like a serious decision, like something in the health and wellness space. So we find that giving the users the option to typically either fill out a form or call is best. And of course, like all clients love getting people on the phone and they find from there that's easiest to convert on their side. But on the landing page piece of it, what we're really focused on is that form and click to call. Specifically, what we see actually for lead gen on paid social is doing a quiz experience to prime the user a little bit more and see what they care about. They can even sometimes be really fluff questions, but we see 5, 6, 7 type of introductory questions gets the user really comfortable to the point where they're able to either call or fill out a form. A lot of times that form actually might be like right below the fold. So contrary to popular belief, I find a lot of conversion rate optimization and marketers, they're like, let's put a bunch of CTAs, let's put this all above the fold. Above the fold is obviously extremely important, but not like in every instance, it might not be the first immediate step that you want someone to take, right? Maybe you have a jump link or something that brings the user slightly below the fold. Maybe they're not ready. So you really have to consider where the user is in the journey, how they got there to determine the best steps. So one of our bigger clients, like I was saying, they have a quiz flow directly below the fold that leads into a form, and then they go from there and work their magic. So the client, they have a call center that will then call the lead within a couple minutes. It's very quick, or the user can click above the fold in the header to call. So it's a really streamlined experience, but we've gotten so into that quiz flow actually on paid search and paid social. We're trying to test and see if we can get out of that and give people an escape route and see, do they go ahead and fill out the quiz, or are they ready to just go ahead and fill out the form? Historically, when we've tried to take the quiz element away, the conversion rate actually declines a lot, which is really interesting because I do find a lot of marketers are like, again, we just need people to make an action immediately. But by giving them kind of some more content, some ways to think through this flow, we find that quiz to form experience typically performs best.
Interesting. So that obviously is the opportunity to test and split the traffic and see what's converting more. It's interesting to hear that the quizzes perform really well. I'm curious I have a few questions. I guess I'll just go back a little bit to the personalization note. Have you used dynamic landing pages that might identify the type of user, or based on the UTMs of the traffic flowing in, might personalize the content? And how have you seen those work as opposed to standard landing pages?
Yeah, that's definitely a super hot topic in this industry. Really, for 5-6 years, we've been seeing everyone talking about personalization. And my kind of hot take is you can get a little too personalized. So, what we typically do when we build these dynamic pages is we can look at channel specific, right? Like we use UTMs all the time to determine dynamic elements. Maybe we make some adjustments to the hero based off of like the search term and things like that. So, a lot of times we'll target at that level where you'll see the image change and maybe the hero copy change, and not really much else from there. But again, a hot take here, but dynamic pages, I think sometimes you can get too dynamic. Sometimes it can slow down page speed, which we know directly impacts conversion rates. So maybe it makes more sense to build out like a category specific page. Let's say we're shopping for a sofa or something, or you're on like a furniture website and you're looking for a sofa or a chair or a kitchen table or something like that, right? In that instance, it might make more sense to create category specific pages there and then start making your more dynamic elements in the hero and things like that. Of course, in the lead gen space, we're seeing that location specific dynamic elements are most important. So again, on that home services side of things, I have a client that is focused in the windows and door space. And so we see with their imagery, if we're selling windows in Miami, we probably want a more tropical looking home or image. There's a very specific home type in that location versus if you were buying windows in Phoenix or in the Northeast or something like that. So those are some localized experiences that we definitely take into consideration. Maybe saying buy windows in Phoenix, like that element might be dynamic. A lot of times we'll do that based off of the user's IP address, which I know isn't perfect, but a lot of times we see that works best, or based off of UTM parameters if they're location specific campaigns and things like that. But what we're seeing more on the ad buying side of things is, we're grouping more and more campaigns together and more types of keywords together. So allowing the IP address manipulation to do its thing actually has typically worked best on that dynamic element. But yeah.
That makes sense. So and I was going to ask if you've ever seen personalization fail. It sounds only when it impacts the experience, but via the page load speed. Are there any other drawbacks to personalization?
Yeah, of course, like I said, the page speed is really top of mind for me. I think sometimes the juice is worth more than the squeeze, I see. So dynamic elements can be much more complicated, of course, to go ahead and build. So I see if I'm like trying to go ahead and spin up a test, I'm like, okay, maybe we're going to make a couple elements dynamic, but we know this base of the page works really well. So like, why would we necessarily deviate from that? Let's maybe start in the hero. And then if we see we want to add a new section or something to the page or switch a little bit of imagery or something out, we can go ahead and do that. But usually because of page speed, because of build times, because our clients are really eager to go ahead and get tests live, we typically opt for the quicker option. So we can run a test or two a month, just depending on their traffic, depending on what we're testing and all of those kind of things.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you you are in an interesting position to ask this question too,
Okay.
because the business will obviously want all marketing spend to go towards incremental traffic, things
Mhm.
that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so, how do you ensure that the traffic that you're driving to the site is incremental versus an inevitable journey that is cheap to purchase in terms of keywords, but probably would have happened anyway?
So I think that would probably be more like on the ad side of things. I don't know if we're directly or like SEO, for example. I don't know if that's specifically what we're doing, but what I find conversion rate optimization is best for is just allowing us to get more efficient traffic, of course. My goal, like I can see this as a win, is if you're significantly scaling traffic, let's say traffic increased by 20% month of month, which is obviously a huge change. If the conversion rate stays fairly consistent, honestly, that's like a massive win. Or even if it declines a little bit, I think people don't take into consideration all of the elements that go into conversion rate. Conversion rate's a calculation, right? You're looking at users or sessions over leads or conversion, whatever purchases, whatever conversion event you're monitoring. So sometimes someone will be like, oh my gosh, like our overall conversion rate went down 10%. And I'm like, you increased traffic by 30% or something like that, right? So that's actually not horrendous. So I think people can start to panic when they just look at numbers without the context. So it's really important to, and what I tell my team to do is explain, look at the data storytelling and really look at all of those elements to explain what's happening and why. And it's not always a horrendous thing.
Yeah. Okay. So it's really looking at the overall traffic, including organic, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're looking at true like conversion rate optimization, yeah, we will start big. We'll see overall, maybe the baseline conversion rate was 3% and your overall sessions across the site were 200,000 in a month or something. We would then segment that traffic and see what channels are feeding into this. What's the percentage of that traffic period over period? Seeing how the channels really interact with one another and getting feedback, of course, from like the different teams that we're working with, whether it's like the SEO team, getting a sense of what they're doing, or paid search, paid social teams, maybe some more traditional sense like TV ads and things like that. Get a sense, talk to each other and make sure you really understand what's going on to help better tell that story. But yeah, we'll start big and always work our way down to see what's going on. Has the device mix switched? Has specific spend in a campaign type changed? So starting big and working your way down to tell that story, I typically find is the most insightful. And that's where we can really provide value to our clients. And that's what I'm telling my team to do.
Gotcha. So you mentioned device mix.
Yeah.
I've been curious on that for a while.
Okay.
How does device mix impact conversion? What does it tell you?
Oh, that's so interesting. It tells us a couple things, of course. One, it's going to tell us where a lot of your traffic is coming from. So if you're focused on paid social like TikTok, Meta, things like that, the majority of your traffic will very likely be mobile. Also, the demographics. So age can obviously play a really big factor in that, right? How many touches it takes to convert. For a higher consideration purchase, maybe they're on their phone and they see an ad and they click on it and then they go back to their computer and go ahead and purchase from desktop. Like this Windows and Doors clients that I keep bringing up, we do see that desktop converts at a higher rate, but the majority of their traffic is mobile. And of course, that's due to a smaller like session or viewer, like user count, but also just because it's easier to convert if you're making a big purchase like that on your computer. I think the biggest thing that we can do in the conversion rate optimization space is think of yourself like in how you would do that. I think and your purchase behavior. I think a lot of people forget how important that is. Think of how you would want to go through this. Like, I know if I'm buying a flight or something, I probably want to be on my computer. That's just me. Maybe other people are different, but I like to do something like it's a little bit higher consideration on a computer. I might be researching on my phone or something like that, but I know at the end of the day, that can make a really huge difference. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so higher consideration purchases are probably more desktop.
Yeah,
So that's what is it depends on the business, and
of
that
course.
will tell you the relative importance of certain device types.
Absolutely. Like we know specifically for e-commerce especially on like lower price point items. We know like people are shopping from their phone, especially if you're looking at like more of the millennial or Gen Z demographic. A lot of them are shopping and doing everything on mobile, but we actually are seeing a change in the tides for the baby boomers. I'm seeing more mobile traffic for them as well. They're much more savvy than some of the older generations. And I think we take that for granted. I think we think that sometimes as marketers that maybe they don't understand how to use their computers or their phones to do things, but they're really savvy. And I think of like my parents and them doing all the stuff on their phones and TikTok and all the stuff. And it's really funny, but they're getting much more savvy. And so we're definitely seeing that device split change over time for sure.
Okay. So you mentioned something earlier, conquesting, and this is a important piece of marketing. I would argue one of the main benefits of something like paid search, but is something very few people are confident in utilizing because it's so expensive. Conquesting is a really important part of marketing, but a lot of people, they're hesitant to spend a lot in conquesting because it's really expensive traffic, even though it's almost all incremental because these people are going on a different journey to a competitor and you're getting your name in front of them. So what's your approach to conquesting, and what kind of business do you think succeeds the most with conquesting?
I think everyone can, honestly, but like I think the channel that you're in really matters. So for true conquesting, I find paid social is best, and Meta. Like that's where you're able to just reach the most users, whether it's through Facebook or Instagram. Like the majority of time when we're talking to our growth teams, and I'm really lucky that I work very closely with like our paid social team, that's typically that what we're focused on immediately, even though there are all these other channels coming into the mix like TikTok, and we do some Pinterest ads, we do some Snapchat ads and things like that. At the end of the day, conquesting is coming from Meta traffic. That's typically what we recommend to start, but we know that's not as efficient. So maybe you're adding in a little bit of a mix of paid search, because we know that paid search return is typically much higher because that there's that user intent there. But I find if you're past like a little bit of that startup phase and you have a little bit of the money to spend and it's not as risky for you, I would definitely recommend starting in Meta and going from there. I think something that we run into on the conversion rate optimization side that can be really tough working with newer businesses is they don't have the as much of ability for tests to fail. Like each test for them is extremely important. And I hate saying the word fail because even a losing test, you have so many learnings from that. There's so much that you can take away and grow from that. When I'm talking to potential new clients, I always stress how important it is to have that, know that some tests can fail and that's okay. And how are we going to grow from this, and what learnings and takeaways are we going to have from that? But they have to be willing to test and try new things. So that's extremely important.
Gotcha. So when you say conquesting on social, how does that work? Is that conquesting messaging, or are you targeting somehow people that use a different product?
So that would be more like broad campaigns. So actually the whole Meta algorithm does that for us. And what we see is that through specific creative, you're able to target users more. Creative and conversion rate optimization really are your two levers at this point, because the media buying unfortunately has gotten like much more automated. It's good and bad, right? So creative to get users in the door, like we'll see a lot of times if there's like a more male specific product that may be putting men in the ad, will automatically target more to men, even though you haven't set up the campaign to exclude women specifically. Like those are some of the levers that you can pull to target that ideal user that you're looking for, and then going from there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So in that case, would you recommend for the marketing team to request creative that is personalized, not only for different competitors, but also for different kinds of users? And
Absolutely.
then let the platforms deliver those naturally to the relevant people?
Absolutely. Let it do its thing. And so, of course, we know that the ad to landing page experience that needs to be really cohesive. So I'm constantly working with our creative team and being like, what messaging is working for you all? What kind of visuals are working well for you all? It's never like a 100% matched exact experience, right? Because creative, they're running new ads weekly. That's how frequently you should be cycling new ads and new creative in. And then our A/B testing programs, our tests typically run anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So alignment is important on that big picture side of things, but it's not going to be like totally apples to apples. So it's important for us to know like the big themes that are working. So if you have like an ad that's specific for jeans, obviously we need like a jeans specific landing page, right? And then we go from there and talk through what's working, what's not, and all of that, and making sure it's aligned. But you're exactly right. Using your creative to target those specific users and maybe specific competitors, like an us versus them style creative, works really well. And then the landing page kind of does its thing to help convert that user.
A business that runs a creative conquesting campaigns is something where they're actually calling out the competitor in the creative. Is that for a more mature business, or can any business really adopt that?
I think it's really, I think like an ethical thing is the bigger question. Do you want to call people out specifically? Is that part of your brand? So of course, what we're seeing is a lot of times, like I can get a little frustrated, and I own this, where it's if we're working with a brand team and they're like, we have to keep everything very specific and we only can treat font specific ways. We can only place this in a certain location. The conversion rate optimizations teams, maybe they're like, okay, but we want to be able to like test specific elements and all of that. So finding that balance between what's really part of your brand and what converts, and having a little bit of balance there, I think is really important. But honestly, I think that's a brand level decision. Like sometimes what we'll do is if it's an us versus them style, like ad or landing page, we might say just like them. We might not call out specific competitors, but like people can interpret what the big competitors are in the space. So maybe that's a little bit of a nicer way to do that. But we definitely have directly called out competitors in the past too. So it just depends on the brand's comfortability with something like that.
Gotcha. And do you find that when you call out a brand, they're likely to call you out as well, and they'll also launch a conquesting campaign? Or is it typically just a one-way move?
I definitely see that if other competitors see like our ads or something out in the wild that call them out, absolutely they would go and come after us, which we would expect. Something that's really important to do is have your own testing strategy and testing roadmap and all of that in mind. I wouldn't say trying to be a follower in the space, but you should always be looking at what your competition is doing and just getting a sense of what's working for them and not. And if they're talking about you or calling you out in specific initiatives. But yeah, having a thorough testing roadmap and a game plan for what you're going to do allows you to be a little bit of a trendsetter in the space. And then sometimes you'll see other competitors are copying what you're doing because they're seeing that it's working.
Yeah. So obviously you mentioned that creative is a huge lever that marketing teams have.
Yeah.
So when you're approaching creative, do you ever recommend that the business gets like, let's say, a third party valuation for something that would call them number one in a certain category? Or basically, do you do research or ask for research that differentiates the company that then can be used in the creative? Basically, how do you get the ammunition to have a winning creative?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so the best place is honestly to look. We like to start at reviews. What are the users saying? Are they like the customer service is amazing? Is it the quality of the product? Is it is it the price point? You can't typically win in all categories, right? So how can you target the specific things that people are calling out? And we find reviews is the best place to start. So a lot of times on creative and landing pages, after we've reviewed these reviews, like if we call out the number of five-star reviews a brand has received. So instead of saying we have a bunch of five-star reviews, if you say we have 500,000 plus five-star reviews, that's much more compelling than just saying, oh, our ranking might be like 4.3 out of 5 stars or something like that. If you have really specific stats to say, we find through a lot of testing that typically works best, and then pulling the specific content from what your users are saying, they're going to be your best ammunition, honestly, for coming up with what those main value props are. I think sometimes brands get a little lost in we want to stick to these specific value props, but does that actually matter to users? Is that something that they care about? Is that even true? Look at what they're saying, and that will help you create ads and landing pages that speak to them.
So how would you pull out insights from reviews? Would it just be copying and pasting the best reviews? Is it aggregating them or something? Like, how do you actually turn that into creative?
Yeah, you can definitely just go through the list and pull specific ones that speak really well and call them out in ads and call them out on landing pages. Or you can just like honestly look for specific themes. So maybe they have a bunch of Amazon or Google reviews or something like that, right? Like you can search for specific themes literally in there. If someone keeps talking about quality or customer service, you can see how many times something like that is mentioned just with a quick search. So looking for some of those key themes is typically how I'd approach something like that.
Gotcha. And then what about research? Let's say the company believes that it's the number one in a category, but doesn't have an official ranking.
Mm.
What should they do?
That is an excellent question. If they believe they're number one in a category, they could do some validity testing. So again, as you can tell, one of my biggest clients is windows and doors. But what they have is they have specific quality tests that they run that shows off the quality of their window. So a couple of things that they do: a little heat gun test where they'll have a window installed, put the little heat gun up, and they'll see, is there any like cool air or warm air coming through that shouldn't be coming through? So that's a really solid test that we are able to display on ads and on landing pages, because that visibly shows, okay, look how sturdy and durable these windows are. Look at it's really holding out any outside heat or coldness. So that's a really cool way to approach that. They also have another durability test where I feel like they throw, I want to say they throw something at the window and it like doesn't break. I forget what it is specifically, but any like videos like that and things are really compelling for users. So even if you're not able to say you're necessarily number one, that is a great way to show visually on the ad and landing page that you are. But I do think, to answer your bigger question, that the research is important, but it might not be for totally new businesses. That might not be feasible. So pull maybe from something that's a little bit more accessible first. And then as you're continuing to grow into a bigger organization, maybe you can have the means to go ahead and do something like that, run some tests and kind of show the quality and your different value props.
Gotcha. And then when you're distributing that creative, what's your approach to using influencers and sponsoring content versus distributing your own content on your own channels?
Yeah, at BMG 360, we have someone on our team that works specifically with influencer partnerships, and she's incredible. So what she does is she is finding high quality influencers in specific verticals, ages, genders, etc. And she maintains amazing partnerships with them so that we're able to plug in and play. But what I've heard from my creative team is that sometimes these like smaller, more micro influencers work better than some of these bigger influencers. I know that's a hot take too, but they've seen just through a lot of their testing that does really well. So usually that's our approach to that side of things. But something that we also offer at BMG 360 is something called sponsored content, which is something that you were referencing. So we build a lot of different websites in-house for specific categories. So we have one that's called Trendsetter HQ. And on that site, it's more of a lifestyle, almost like quality edit type of thing. We have a bunch of user reviews and things like that, and 5 reasons why type of listicle style content, all these different articles, gift guides that might have like our specific clients, like in them, like they buy to run ads to that specific article or pay to have their name on like that list of like top 10 sofa companies or something like that. So that's a really interesting way to bring in like conquesting, like we've been talking about, from even more of a non-branded approach. And then of course you have more of your true branded style when you're doing like meta ads and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. So the mix.
Yeah.
I love the point about the micro influencers because that's my whole shtick. Because marketing analytics is a pretty niche interest, and for people to take time out of their free time to learn about it, you're not going to get like a super broad audience as you might with some of the more broad podcasts. But the listeners they're loyal and they're really interested in the topic.
Yeah.
That just makes it a really great place for brands to speak to those people. They know exactly who they're reaching. So that makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask also, I know you're not as much on the ad buying side, but about Performance Max for
Okay.
Google and the sort of black box of, and you mentioned that a lot of ad buying is becoming more automated. I think this would follow that trend. How do you feel about that? Is that something that helps with conversion rate optimization, or do you find that it steals organic traffic and the overall conversions don't tend to go up?
So I actually think this makes conversion rate optimization even more important, because that's really one of the only levers that you have to pull anymore. So it makes my job a little bit more important, which I love. So for me, it's good. I don't think ad buyers would say that as much. But again, given I was talking a little bit earlier about my experience buying search and social ads myself, the space has changed pretty dramatically. So yeah, I think it just makes our relationships even more important with our media buyers. And I'm constantly talking to them and building up their landing pages. But again, because Performance Max is targeting it all and it's really broad, contrary to popular belief, I would probably build a broader landing page and go from there. Again, personalization isn't always the best way to approach things, especially when Meta or Google or any of these specific ad networks are doing the targeting for you and bringing in those users.
Gotcha. So if you are using a broader targeting mechanism, then you shouldn't be personalizing. But if you are launching more specific ad types, then personalization, as long as it's not hampering the experience, is recommended.
Yeah, I would say that, which I don't know if everyone would agree with me, and that's totally fine. I think I have a slightly different approach to things, but in my almost 10 years of doing conversion rate optimization, even before it was really called zero and we had like a specific name around it, that's what I see works best for my clients in the lead gen and the e-commerce space. For me, that's what works, but I know that's probably not best for everyone. So I don't want to always say one size fits all. Just very true to the zero mindset. You should test it yourself and see what works. But I think for everyone, the best approach is start broad and see how granular you can go through testing. And if it makes sense for you, amazing. You can get super granular and do all the things, but it can also take years to get there. Like I have another client who's a home builder, and we've been working with them for almost 5 years. It's been like 4.5 years. And we've gotten to the point where we're super personalized by location and by home types and things like that. But that has taken almost 5 years to get to that point. So we started super broad. We had a paid social landing page. And then we're like, okay, let's add these different ways to convert to the page. Let's now target specific locations. Now let's target home types. So we were seeing what worked before just going all in, because like I said, it's a lot of effort to get really personalized and it's not a one size fits all. So like, why would you try to limit that at the beginning? See how far you can go and work into that would be my best recommendation.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you're looking at the data
Mhm.
for conversions, are you looking at multi-touch attribution? How do you actually attribute customers or conversions to these upper funnel activities?
Yeah, so the big topic right now is all the MMM models. So we're working on a lot of that for our clients and very custom reporting. But for Zero and what I'm doing, my source of truth is Google Analytics for the majority of my clients. And I know GA4, big thing, but one of the updates from that was looking more at the user experience more than session based. So I think that was like one of the big positives of GA4, even though, it has its issues and things. Looking more at that holistic experience is definitely more important. And so those are the conversations that we're having with our different marketing teams and our clients, creating these custom reporting models so we can see how the channels are working together, where the conversion is actually happening, how many touch points does it take. So investing in those types of tools is extremely important to helping you scale to make sure you're staying efficient, but also setting different KPIs by channel is really important. Setting specific, whether it's CAC goals or ROAS, whatever you're looking at, making sure that you have different goals and seeing how they're all working together.
Okay. Okay. And then for MMM, how are you using that for conversion rate optimization?
So what we're doing is we are having all of our different like growth teams pulling in all of their in-platform data And then we're also pulling in our GA4 data. And then from there, we're splicing it all together to see what's going on. So if I'm looking at stuff at the landing page level or the web page level, I am looking at like my GA data, but I'm also comparing it to the conversion rates that we're seeing in platform and things like that and going from there. I still consider my source of truth to be Google Analytics at the end of the day, but we're really pulling this into one tool to be able to tell a bigger picture. So I think if you were talking to our paid search team or our TV team or something like that, they would probably say something really different. But for me, it's fairly similar to how it's been. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then for things that don't use GA, like television, advertising, how do you optimize that?
That definitely is probably more of a them type of question, but I know creative is extremely important there. And so how they measure what they're doing is they use a lot of like toll-free numbers. So we have a lot of call tracking in place. And then we also have tried QR codes and things like that where the user can hover over and scan and then go to a specific landing page. So it's not a perfect science, but by using call tracking or specific URL paths for landing pages or having the user scan a QR code, that's how we're able to best track those things and pull that all together.
Gotcha. Have you done any like match market testing to see if there's any, you take two similar markets, you treat with like TV and all those other things, and then the other you don't. Have you done any of that to see basically the relative lift of certain tactics on the conversion rate?
Not unfortunately really as much on my side, but I know like our TV team, for example, has done a lot of that. Like they have TV campaigns, radio, podcasting, things like that. So they're very focused on those types of tests and looking at similar DMAs and all of that and comparing them and seeing how it all works together or works against each other.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting tests in marketing. I know that Google came out with the ideal split of budget. It was like 70% on things that have always worked, 20% on new emerging things, and then 10% big bets. What is your opinion on that? Do you follow that typically when you're recommending testing budgets?
So I think, a lot of the time we do. So I know like from if I'm thinking of like our paid social team, for example, like I know they have specific campaigns with set budgets that are always like the testing initiatives. And then we have our evergreen campaigns. So I would say it's more like that 80-20 type of rule. But what we like to look at from a conversion rate optimization perspective is I'm actually focused more, instead of on spend, I'm focused more on like the user count or session count. And then I will be able to do a statistical significance analysis and see what's our baseline conversion rate, how long would it take for us to increase conversion rate based off of the average like users that we have per day and things like that. So that's typically how I'm looking at it. And then of course that ties to a specific budget. So I'll tell my growth team, I'll be like, I need 20,000 users a week or something like that for this test for us to hopefully reach statistical significance in, let's say, 3 weeks if we have like a 10% lift or something like that. And then they go from there and they tell the client, okay, this is X budget. So it really is like a group project because I'm not as directly involved with the spend, but I know how much traffic I need to run my initiatives.
Okay. And are you looking at cost per user to drive that traffic in order to figure out how much additional budget you need?
That would probably be more of a them question, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm really looking at volume.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I guess that's probably how budget is distributed. That's at least how I've done it in the past, is always looking at what is the investment and then the marketing outcomes, and then that as a baseline. And then possibly looking at various spend levels, how the curve works out for how many, because there's a diminishing returns with additional budget at a certain point. Oh, another question about offers. So offers can help with conversion rates, and especially in the B2C space, a little trickier in B2B. But what's your experience with offers, and how do you recommend a business utilizes offers to increase their conversion rate?
Okay, so love offers. I'm always like, dude, offers. So like for us, it helps us tremendously. Like our conversion rate will almost always increase if you have some sort of offer. But what's interesting is when you get into offer testing and seeing, okay, does this messaging work versus this messaging? Does this offer work versus this one? Where's the placement of the offer on the page? Where is it mentioned in the ad? So that's like the stuff that we have a ton of fun with. Sometimes really in your face above the fold. Something that I love to test for clients is we'll do like a countdown timer. So it'll be like a fake countdown timer, which I know sounds not amazing, but it works really well. So let's say it's the user lands on the page and then we automatically start like a 10-minute timer. So it really creates that sense of urgency and shows them, okay, this offer is going to run out in 10 minutes. I need to go ahead and fill this out or buy this product or whatever it is. So that really creates that sense of urgency. But I love testing offers. And a lot of my lead gen clients do have offers running a lot of the time. What's really tough is, again, talking about the brand play and the balance of brand is, do you want to be known as a brand that's always running an offer? Because that also on the opposite side of things might not help, might hurt validity. It might maybe show like the quality isn't as great. If people know that offers are always running, that might actually decrease the sense of urgency. So do you want to be super reliant on that in your big picture strategy, or do you want to try that a little bit more sporadically? I think that really depends on the brand, where they are in their life cycle. Are they a newer brand, or are they more established? What are they selling, and those kind of things? So that's really like an individual discussion that I would have brand by brand. We had one brand that we worked with that was in like the more like underwear type of apparel space. And their product was really affordable, but they always had offers running and we could not test out of offers. And they're like, we need to get out of offers. And I'm like, we literally can't test out of them. Like, we have tried different placement. We've tried removing it. We've tried all these different things, and offers are like the only thing that is working for you. So I would say really think about it critically, about your business, about your margins and all of those types of elements, and see if this is something that is worth it for you. Or do you want to present yourself as more of a luxury higher end brand or something? Maybe a promotion doesn't make a lot of sense in those cases, but really important discussion to be having with your clients.
Yeah, it's almost like you can train your customers to wait for offers.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, and Apple doesn't go on sale as much as we wish they would.
I know. Yeah, but look at their quality. And everyone has an Apple product. Like, you're willing to pay for it. You're like, this is what I want, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. It really just depends on what you're going for.
Yeah. It's a final question. So when you're talking about the messaging piece, what's the thought process, or how do you approach optimizing the messaging? Are you talking to the creative team? Are you doing research on drivers of what gets customers to buy? What's the process for optimizing the actual, what's written in the creative?
Yes. Okay. So a few things, like you said, creative is a really big piece. What's working for them? What are they trying? Reviews, again, I know I've seen like a broken record, but what are people talking about? Looking at your competitors and also seeing what they're talking about. And then lastly, one of my favorite tactics, because I know I've focused so much on lead gen in this conversation, but we do really work across different verticals and industries. So what are like completely other industries talking about? That can actually give you a lot of really good ideas for testing and language that you might not necessarily think about. You might be so focused on, oh, I have to talk about this for my specific vertical. I love bringing in like tests from other industries and verticals and trying them for different types of clients and seeing how that's doing, trying that type of language and things like that. So that's how I would typically approach something like that, but that's an excellent question.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of testing for sure.
Yeah,
which I love. I'm a big fan of testing. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ali. This has been a wonderful conversation. I love CRO. So thanks for chatting and for teaching the audience.
Thank you so much, Alex. Nice to chat with you. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.